Welcome back to TrueNAS Tech Talk. Today, Kris and I will be talking about our upcoming release, TrueNAS 26. And yes, you heard that number correctly. We'll talk about this and our plans for the upcoming annual release cycle. We'll touch quickly on the flash crisis that's still ongoing and the dual actuator drive announcement from Western Digital. And finally, Kris is going to get on his soapbox again. And today's subject is the one that everybody loves to hate. That's right, it's AI. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the show for another week. Before we continue with TrueNAS Tech Talk, make sure you give us a like and subscribe to the channel. Otherwise, I'm going to take Kris's work laptop, format it, put Windows 11 on it, and leave all the telemetry enabled.
No.
And he doesn't want that. So make sure you give us a like and subscribe.
I've worked so hard to go Windows free. I'm almost 100% Windows free in the house. There's just a few left for the kids' desktops to play a couple games, of course. But don't do that to me. Awful. Yeah. That's mean.
Oops, my flash drive slipped. Yeah. Well, let's get into a little bit of news here, Kris. Unfortunately, it's not real great news. As we've all seen, the flash crisis is here and real. We're looking at the latest metrics saying that, flash has now reached 16 times the cost of a spinning disk. And that is, we'll say it is significantly more than it was before. So what are we looking at here, Kris?
Well, let's say it's not just flash. There's a lot of things being impacted. But what I'm really seeing looking at the industry, Kris, is we're about to see a hardware arms race unleashed like we've never seen before. I don't see signs of it necessarily slowing down, but it's touching a lot of things and components beyond just flash and even RAM. But speaking of RAM, saw an interesting article just the other day. Now Intel's entering the arms race. They're working on their new technology, a stacked RAM, or ZAM as they call it. That's going to take some getting used to saying. But, we're about to see some large steps forward and what kind of memory capacities you could potentially get on a chip as well. So that's a good thing, even though, of course, prices and all the pressures and all that, it's going to be happening in the background. But hey, these pressures are what kind of drive innovation, drive new technologies, drive people doing crazy, wild things that pan out. Some do, some don't. And I'm really eager to see how this shakes out in the end.
Yeah, this kind of stuff is like, you said, it's going to be entering into the enterprise first, but it is going to shuffle its way down to the consumer level eventually. I mean, think about the pace of technology over the past 20 years and consider what kind of capacities you had available, in 2006. We weren't running, multi-terabyte hard drives and, independent things like that at home. It's one of these things that'll have to filter down. But hey, stacked RAM. They're doing stacked cache on the AMD chips. Pretty sure Intel's looking at stacked cache for their next ones. So, stacking memory into kind of doesn't necessarily have to be the HBM style stacking with the, 4096-bit wide bus. But if they're looking at it purely for a capacity increase, this is probably an excellent way to do it.
I mean, it's about time, too. I've noticed a trend in recent years. It seems like even consumer-grade desktops, laptops, RAM capacities have really stagnated. We kind of hit 16 gigs as the sweet spot, and even for gaming consoles and all that. And it hasn't quite become, outside of, us who play games and do more extreme things on our desktops, 3264 has not really become the standard. For a while there was this steady drumbeat of, 4 was okay, 8 was okay, and they became the new default. Oh, maybe this pushes it in the right direction. And in a couple years from now, 64 gigs is now the standard.
Yeah. As long as software keeps up with that and doesn't just see it as, this is free real estate. I mean, I've been dealing with a RAM leak in Steam VR for a little while now that I'm trying to track down. It's basically leaking about 1.5 to 2 megabytes per second while VR is running. So that adds up real fast. That's about 8 gigs an hour. So that's 16 gigs in a gaming system. That's entirely consumed by leaked memory in 2 hours. Thankfully, that's about how long my battery pack lasts. But
that's a bug, though. They got to fix that.
That's a bug. That's a bug to fix.
Yeah, this aggression will not stand.
Exactly. I just hope that with all this increased capacity, people don't look at it as, people often say software is like a gas. It expands to fill the available capacity. If you talk about years ago, I think about how much people were able to do with very little resources back 20 or 30 years ago. Let's get some optimization. Let's slim down our code and let's make the most of what we've got here.
Well, let's jump to the disk side because we had some really interesting news. And this is actually really funny because Kris and I were just talking about this offline before one of the shows a few weeks ago. I was kind of looking ahead going, okay, well, with all the flash stuff going on and pricing and the pressures that's going to put on hard drives again, what are we going to see some of the hard drive guys do? What's going to be the technology? And I was telling Kris, I think multi-actuator is going to become a thing again. It's going to be hot again. Sure enough, WD announced they're going in hard for multi-actuator drives, along with announcing some of their roadmap for the next generation of large capacity models. They're even talking some cool stuff about in the 2030s with Hammer technology getting past the 140 terabyte barrier. That's huge.
Yeah,
So
that's
hard drives, again, ain't going away as fast as we thought. Maybe if you asked us a year or two ago, it seems like we're going to see a resurgence in hard drive technology. And, multi-actuator is one of those things that's been on our roadmap in the background for a while. We haven't pushed it to the forefront, but I think that's going to have to change here in the near future.
Yeah, it's one of those things where we know like Seagate's already out there with their Exos, their 2X double platter ones.
Yep.
It's part of it is the technological challenge of us supporting it, especially with, what sort of decision is made internally on how to split these up. It might actually be easier for us to handle it if they just do it based on LBA splitting, where they say, okay, at the 50% mark, every LBA below this is on actuator 1, every LBA above it is on actuator 2, because then it's a set defined rule and we can, build it appropriately. We could build the logic in our middleware to handle those partitions. I know some people are doing this with third-party scripts right now. Hey, that's great. I'm glad it works. We don't have it in our middleware yet because we want to make sure that if we do release something like that, we put all the necessary safeguards so you don't accidentally have, 2 partitions on one drive that are in the same failure domain. That's a problem.
It'll be interesting too to see how these things innovate, because we had talked about when I went to the OpenZFS conference back in October of this last year as well, and Seagate was there and talked about their roadmap and about fail in place with multi-actuator. What if one actuator dies, but the rest of the drive's still good and the odds of that failing is very low, so maybe you lose some capacity, but the drive keeps going. So you can fail in place, drop the capacity, rebuild the bits that were lost and keep on trucking. So that's interesting. We'll see if that kind of thing plays out too, Chris. Maybe down the road, multiple actuators, one fails, but they are different parts of the VDEV. So you bring in your hot spare and it's only resilvering the part of the disk that failed, right? The other half and the other VDEV still could be there. It all, of course, depends on how it fails and how extravagant it is. But it's going to be interesting. We'll have to figure out how we're going to adapt to that and make ZFS play nicely with it. But I think all the right pieces are there. It doesn't seem like it'll be a super heavy lift. It's just about getting the logic right and doing it in a way that protects you from foot shooting yourself and splitting the drive and putting it all in the same VDEV, and you lose both halves and now you're down. All
exactly.
Your gone, all that good stuff.
Yeah. The funny thing is, this is where I can actually see that crazy idea of people saying, hey, can you put a hard drive through an NVMe interface? And that might be the solution here, because NVMe has a great already, sort of solved for that, in NVMe namespaces, rather than having to do a Band-Aid solution with, weird LBA alignment partitions in SATA or splitting it into 2 LUNs on SAS, and then you lose your second SAS port because you're using it for internal communications. Make them in separate NVMe namespaces. You could have each spindle, you could have 4 spindles, each one's its own namespace, and those would just show up as 4 devices to us, and we'd go, well, these are all part of NVMe 1, namespace 1 through 4. Well, they're going to share a common failure domain of the device. We got 4 namespaces. Something we can handle.
I don't even have to go out on a big limb to make that prediction, Chris. The vendors are already talking about an NVMe world for hard drives. That's coming. Exactly. It's just a matter of how fast, when, and what the transition period looks like. There are nobody's loving SATA and SAS and having to keep those going for too much longer. They do want to get to the glorious, we have one protocol and everything works that way. So I think that's going to happen. The question is how many years away before we see that more mainstream, and there will be a transition period. But I mean, we've noted this in previous episode, Chris, hard to find a motherboard that even has SATA ports on it these days sometimes. So a lot of this is already gone all NVMe.
Yeah, if you're building a small form factor system, you might get 2 these days, like on the little ITX boards. I think some of them have gone completely, SATA free. They're just saying, hey, you get M2 slots. That's all you get. But hey, talking about plans going forward here, let's talk about the plans for TrueNAS. So right off the bat, a number of you have heard us say it over the past week or two, where Kris and I have said TrueNAS 26. And shout out to those of you who have called it out in our forums, in the comment section below, with how come they're saying TrueNAS 26? We were saying 2604 earlier. We were always using point releases. So, that this is basically official now. The name for the next release of TrueNAS is going to be TrueNAS 26. So
this is why people watch the show. They get those early little tidbits and go, wait, I think they're saying something. You're not saying it.
That might have been deliberate. That might have been deliberate this whole time, Chris.
Maybe it was.
So for the more astute among you, you probably say, well, that's a 2-digit release. What's happening to the monthly? You want to shed a little light on that, Chris?
Yeah. So we are moving to an annual release cycle, as the release announcement discussed. But really, this is important because there's a bunch of things we want to do with this. We've been on a 6-month cadence for a while now, which has been great as we did the transition from core to scale, BSD to Linux. We were able to make rapid progress. But we're looking back at the schedule now and just the amount of things we have to add. And some of these are bigger projects that are coming in the future. And an annual cadence makes more sense for a lot of the innovation we're going to do. And there's not going to be this artificial month timeline. So there will be a big 26 release, then you'll get a .1, you'll get a .2. But what's going to be a little different is we still intend to bring certain feature updates into the .1 and .2 packs, a la how they do on, say, your Mac, right, or your Apple iPhone. But those will be specific and targeted. So instead of it being a general purpose, .1 adds a whole slew of things, it'll be like, no, we decided to bring this feature in, and it's going to be centered around that, along with any bug fixes that need to go with it. And this means we'll also have no more code names we have to figure out. It's going to be just TrueNAS 26.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
So long, and thanks for all the fish.
That's right.
That's right. No more fish code names. For those of you who really like them, I apologize for that, but it does make it a little easier so that people aren't trying to remember, am I trying to install Dragonfish or Electric Eel or Fangtooth? And it also means that for all the odd job jokes we made, nobody has to call it Goldeye versus Goldeneye anymore.
That's right. But related to all this, and this is particularly interesting, is going to an annual cadence also frees us up to do something a little bit different on the enterprise side and begin offering our first LTS. So that's going to be something that we'll be making some noise about later in the year. You'll hear about that as that gets closer to launch. We expect 26 will become the first LTS version of TrueNAS. Again, that's expected to be an enterprise thing. We're looking at how we can offer that potentially for software builds out in the wild too, if that'll be something that could be purchased through Connect. But more to be discussed on that in the future. But again, it's going to be a good change. I think for you, if you're listening, it means you'll get a little bit less rapid pace of, I got to update every 6 months and go through kind of a big update cycle. You can do it once a year. That's a little less disruptive. The updates also will be spaced out a bit more. And I want to stress, we're going to be doing a much longer beta and RC cycle, because that had been the challenge, really the biggest challenge with the 6-month cadence was you push a beta out and you're pushing RC out 4 weeks later. So by the time you get the beta in people's hands, you're already started the RC testing. There's not a lot of time for testing and feedback. So we're going to be stretching that out where we do longer month periods. There's going to be a beta 1, a beta 2. And by the time we get to the .0, we're looking to make that basically a GA release for everybody. And even on our enterprise side, it's going to have a much longer soak period before it gets to that .0 status. So good things all around. It's the right kind of time and change to make this change. And I think it'll just be easier for us to remember and talk about, I'm running TrueNAS 26 or TrueNAS 27. You'll still get your kernel updates every year. So you'll get your new Linux LTS, most likely a new OpenZFS version. So good stuff.
Yeah. And we promise no liquid glass in TrueNAS. Not going to happen. So that you can, I don't know what you want. You want an entirely transparent UI for every aspect, and we'll overlay it. No liquid glass. Don't need that. That's an extra frill. Well, I think it's time, Chris, for you to get on your soapbox here. I think you've had this, this one coming for a little while. Let's hop on here, and it's time for Chris's soapbox. What's our subject today? I've been noodling
in the show notes for a few weeks now on this idea. It's time to talk about some things AI again, and just had a lot of thoughts and things we could share here. And it's a good conversation piece, and it's also reflective on where we are in the software industry, TrueNAS, other industries as well. I mean, we see it everywhere now. AI is all over. And there's a lot of different areas, different industry segments that are reacting to it differently. I'm sure you've seen some of the pushback on AI and gaming, for example. That's a big one. There's obviously AI and code gen. I just read something this morning about how a bunch of legal technical firm stock has dropped because Claude has announced their legal review plugin for Claude Claude Cowork. Got to get the tools right here. And all this stuff's happening here. But this keeps reminding me of just all these other cycles. I'm now old enough to have lived through a few of these, and I see a lot of parallels here. I look at the 90s. A lot of us, depending on your age, you may or may not remember this, You guys remember in the 90s when CGI became a thing, became more popular in movie industry? There was a lot of the same kind of visceral pushback. Oh, we'll never use CGI. It looks like crap. It's robbing practical effects artists of their hard trade, all this stuff. And so there was that immediate visceral, we won't use CGI kind of pushback. And we're seeing the cycle kind of play out again here with respect to AI and gaming and other parts of our industry. So, of course, the software industry, which I'll speak to here, we're going through the same revolution right now with the rise of AI-driven coding. And we're seeing some of the same, segments of back and forth of those who are saying, we'll never use that. We want the same old tried and true methods. We're never going to embrace that. We hate this. It's a fad, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. Or the quality isn't good enough for us. It's this initial release. No, this isn't good. We're going to keep on doing things the way we've always done them.
It's the same arguments I heard in the 90s about CGI. But the one thing I know about this now, having seen it played out a few times, is you can't put the genie back in the bottle. When it's out, it's out. And at some point, all the argument, all the emotions, all those discussions just become moot. It just becomes plain math. So again, going back to the 90s, sure, the CGI sucked. In the early days, especially if you go back and watch some movie from 91 or 92 with some of the early CG, it doesn't hold up well.
No, it's like sort of, early 3D video games. The texture quality was just awful. I remember some early CGI stuff. I looked at it, and to look at it now, I kind of see it as akin to the wall textures in the original Doom. Like it's blocky, it was blurry, it did not look good. You could very well tell that that's 100% computer generated, and you went,
but that kind of stuff probably, hey, the early Dooms and Quakes and all those things, Wolfenstein 3D, those things excited us as young as technology guys and nerds, because it's like, this is the future. We were willing to look past the obvious shortcomings and flaws that it looked like garbage in the day, because we immediately got it and saw, wow, this is where the future's going. 3D games are going to become the thing. And sure enough, that's what happened. Same thing with CG. A lot of folks immediately saw this and said, oh, wow, we can do some really creative things with this. This is going to be the future. And yes, in its current form, it sucks a bit today. It's got its flaws and drawbacks, but the movie studios embraced it wholesale. And yeah, sure, we still have some artisan folks out there, some directors who rely almost entirely on practical effects. But that's kind of the point. Those folks are so special and notable because they're a rare and dying breed. There's not many directors out there who do that. And again, they're cool and it is kind of neat. And everybody has their hobby horse where it's like, I like the old way of crafting this or that. And, we're snobs in the sense that I can tell the difference. And I do enjoy a good movie with good practical effects. Don't get me wrong. But you reach a certain point of critical mass where things like the effects are good enough. And the average person here, note, I'm saying average person here, not the aficionados or the snobs, like the car snobs or whatever, they can't tell the difference. Or if they can, it's not significant enough to take them out of the enjoyable experience of watching the movie, which is really all that matters to them. They just want to go eat their popcorn, have a good time, see a good story, be entertained. Cool. As long as the effects don't get in the way of it, they can look past a bit of like, it's got a little clumsiness here and there.
Yeah. They're not freeze framing and pixel peeping on the screen. Yeah. And I love how you called out the car analogy before I even had a chance to make it, because, you've got the guys like, my mechanic, he loves his old carved vehicles. I had a computer issue with my van and he said, I don't want to touch that. I said, look, all I'm asking you to do is just, get up under the guts behind the instrument cluster, pull that thing out and hand it to me. I'll deal with the rest. But there are certain people, like you said, they're purists. They don't want to do that, and that's fine. They're going to have their niche of it, and say, hey, this is where I live. This is what I want to do. You're handcrafting things, and that's going to continue to be a unique and beautiful. But like you said, at a certain point, we hit that 320 kilobit MP3 of quality, where sure, the audiophile listening to it on their, $100,000 stereo system with their gold-plated cables on elevators from the floor, they might be able to tell the difference. Mm-hmm. But the average person, even on a pretty high-end, but not, six-figure stereo or whatever, they say, no, this sounds great. I can't tell the difference.
It's the same problem. I mean, I could just segue here to TVs, for example. We saw TVs kept getting better and better. We went from standard definition, then we got DVDs, 480p, then we did Blu-rays, 1080p, and then we got 4K TVs. And guess what? 8K TVs haven't really taken off. And you know why? Because we hit the point of diminishing returns where it's like the average person really can't tell the difference anymore. And so it might be that we peak out at 4K for a while before maybe we eventually make it to 8. Will there be a 16? Who knows? Maybe not. At some point, your eyeballs can't tell the difference. But if we wanted to pick another example, Chris, let's get back into cars, right?
Yeah. Self-driving cars.
Yeah, self-driving cars, sure. New, scary. A lot of people have inherent distrust of them. So I drive a Tesla, full disclosure. And I did get I don't actually have the full self-driving, but they've given out trials of it from time to time. And I've turned it on and played with it. It's creepy as all get out. Yeah, you're taking your hands off the wheel. It's just driving. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm bracing for every turn. Is it going to stop? Is it going to do this or that? But you know what? It worked. And the progress is progress. The math is math. The goal here is not to reach perfection. There's never going to be a point where an automated car is perfect. But that's not the real bar we're trying to pass here. The bar we're trying to pass here is being just as safe or maybe just slightly better than the average human driver. And I don't know about you, Chris, or you live up in Canada, but down here where I live in the good old US of A in the South, the bar is pretty damn low for human drivers. So
I was going to say,
maybe we're already at that point or very near to it.
I probably, like when I'm out on my bike on two wheels, I would probably feel safer around a fleet of Teslas that I know they can see me because they're covered in cameras. I'm pretty sure they're not going to merge into me. I'm bright red on the bike and the clothing, so they can see me. It's the people who are busy looking at their phone or changing the radio station or something. They're the ones I'm worried about not seeing me as much.
Distracted, drunk drivers, impaired drivers.
Exactly.
Imagine New Year's Eve parties and all that if nobody was behind the wheel, and like the accident rate would go down, how many lives we saved. But let's circle this
everybody
back.
Everybody has a personal taxi taking them home.
Yeah.
That's safer.
Which doesn't get inebriated and is always going to have the same quality level. Exactly. It doesn't get tired and all that. But let's circle this back to some TrueNAS and kind of our industry here a little bit more specifically, Chris. So, of course, we're going through this same kind of process of revolution with AI authored code right now. And I use that word intentionally. It is revolutionary. It's also fresh, new, and exciting. Again, I look at it like the same way I looked at, Wolfenstein 3D when I first got the floppy disk. I think what was it, like a CVS pharmacy or something? It had, where you could buy the little demo shareware copies back in the day. Nobody remembers those now. I'm really old. Sure, right. It had a lot of flaws and rough edges. But anybody who's seriously looking at this cycle we're in will recognize that, sure, this is the pattern repeating all over again. AI-generated code has its issues. It makes mistakes. It over-engineers. Sometimes it under-engineers. I can point to lots of examples where it has done things wrong or incorrectly. I wouldn't have made that mistake. But that's no different than pointing to the bad examples of CG in the 90s. And yet within a decade or less, it was just the de facto standard. Everyone was doing it. We're seeing the same cycle repeat again here, almost identical, probably even faster than ever before. We're already seeing it happen in some segments of the software development industry right now, where almost all code is being written by AIs. And some developers who are doing all the code through AI generation, remember, it's about the bar for passing here. Now, I've been in the software industry working 20 plus years now in software development. Believe me, I've seen a lot of horrendous things in the day. Heck, I've committed a lot of horrendous code in the day. So the bar can be pretty dang low for humans also at times, if we're being honest with ourselves. So does AI generated code have to be perfect? No. Does it have to be right on the very first try? No. How many times did I get code right on the first try? Heck no. Does it need to work at the end of the day? Of course. Just because we can point to a few mistakes, hallucinations, or some slop that it got generated doesn't negate the fact that this is still truly revolutionary and is already changing our world. Now, you still have to go through the same process of review, cleanup, extensive testing, shake out all the bugs. All that doesn't change. I mean, we do that with human developers. That's just best practice. That's how you do software development, right? But the velocity at which we can do that and a bunch of other things in parallel now with AI assistance is, again, revolutionary. And we can't put the genie back in the bottle. This isn't going away. So This is where I'll challenge some of my peers in the gaming industry. Again, at some point, you're going to have to get over it. This is going to be the way games are made. There's going to be that next blockbuster that somebody's going to vibe code, and maybe even for the media assets. And guess what? Customers won't care where it came from. They'll just say, this is a great game. It's got a good concept. It's a good story. I love it, right?
Yeah. It's going to start in with, there's pieces of, gaming that are using that for their media right now. Like Arc Raiders is popping off pretty huge, and it got a lot of initial controversy, I'm pretty sure, for, I think it was some of the voice lines they used. They did some samples, and they were dynamically generating some voice lines for their feed initially. They're not doing it real time because obviously that's computationally expensive. But they said, hey, we got some voice actors to come in, read some sample scripts. We agreed with them. We're going to AI generate some more lines, and they probably compensated them accordingly to say we're going to AI generate. So you read us some good sample, we'll pay you for it. But it's going to continue to happen. I mean, even like last year's game of the year, Expedition 33, there was a big kerfuffle about people are claiming they used AI to generate it. Well, they used AI to generate one placeholder asset that slipped into the initial release. As soon as it was called out, it got removed. But the hate engine started up already, was saying, they're using AI, they're using AI. Eventually, what's going to happen is, somebody's going to make AI, AI media assets, or like you said, even an entirely vibe coded game. And it's going to be grossly successful. I mean, how many people already make the joke about, things being clones? Back in the day, it was everything was a Doom clone, or it's a something else clone, a Doom clone, a Quake clone, a whatever clone. How many of the games nowadays do people make jokes about that they're all the same? The joke about the gun and ball gamer saying, that people only play games where you shoot people with a gun or you shoot a ball around. Are they so distinct from one another that it's not just like basically an asset swap on top of it with a new year of, new year of sports stars or a new, arsenal of weaponry?
Yeah, I say that's a fair point, but it's going to be interesting to see. I guess I would just challenge again all the folks in the different industries who listen to this podcast. We're just going to have to all come to grips with this, including the gaming industry. And I know there's folks still making noises about, I'll never use AI, but you know what? As another popular sci-fi show coined that I grew up watching, resistance is futile. In this case, the revolution's already happened. There's no going back. You can't put the genie in the bottle. It's here to stay. And we'll look back at it, sure. At some point, I'll be a little grayer, maybe much grayer, and be looking back at this and go, wow, some of that AI code early on was really crummy. But it's just, that was the genesis. This is where it started. And look at where we've come to now in another 10, 20 years.
Yeah, you'll be grayer. I won't be any balder because I got that one out of the way quickly.
Well, you got it over with. That's good. Yeah. I'm working on it here, right?
I'm going for the Patrick Stewart aging plan. I'm just going to immediately turn 40 and that's it. I'll just stay there.
There you go. That's not a bad idea. But actually, the next one I think that people will go in a revolt about is maybe at some point it'll be about like lab grown meat or food, right? Oh man, that'll be interesting to see when that starts showing up everywhere in the shelves, or 3D printed meat. It never actually came from an animal, and everyone, oh my God, I'll never eat that. And then at some point, people are going to say, yeah, but I can't tell the difference.
Well, wasn't there? I'm pretty sure I'm not 100% positive, but there was a big YouTuber who did a big show about lab grown meat recently, talking about, hey, here it is. And he went into a factory or facility where they were doing that. And I don't know if it's a case where he's, advocating for or against. I just saw a little clip of it. So I'm not going to speak to too much detail, but it's already, entered the popular culture. And, naturally there's people who are going to be pro and anti it. But again, there's going to be space for that, like there is now, the organic, farm raised, local, buy local kind of thing. And there's going to be the place for the McDonald's,
Sure.
I can go to McDonald's, I can get a mass produced burger for $6 or whatever. Or I can go to a place that uses entirely, locally raised beef and sustainable farming. And I'm probably going to pay more, but is it going to be better? Well, it might be.
Might be. I bet some people say, I don't want to pay $15.99 for a burger, or whatever it is by then.
And some people will, and some people will go, you know what? It's worth it to me. I'm going to continue to support that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So there's room for all. But anyway, it'll be interesting to see. It's just fun to watch the cycle play out again. And, the next few years are going to be interesting to watch how technology innovates again to meet the new challenges being put on us all by AI. The race is on to see who can make it smaller and then eventually make it small enough to run inside your humanoid robots. probably the next big industry to keep an eye on.
As the blessing and the curse goes, may you live in interesting times.
Yeah, no doubt.
The interesting times are upon us. Well, I think it's time for a little bit of Q&A here, Chris. We asked you on previous episodes to say, hey, go ahead and give us some of these crazy ideas that you'd like to see implemented back into TrueNAS. And so we got our first one here coming in from Derringer7. He said, on the crazy ideas plane, VMware was the one who originally came with that USB-based OS boot, and writes were pretty much entirely done. You loaded it into RAM, so it didn't wear the USB. Enterprise, small business used it for years. It basically saved you a drive slot. So we said this would be a boon to TrueNAS in both the home lab and probably the business world. So, but the question is, what has to be given up to make this work? So, what do we think on this, Chris? Like, is this an idea worth looking at?
It's an interesting idea, and it's one we probably will need to take a look at and discuss a little more internally here. There are some caveats with it, because there is certain things you want to persist certain bits of your configuration, all that, and sometimes it's not appropriate to put that on the pool and keep the load on the pool. So maybe you do want some to live on the USB, but you just don't want to stress it with writes constantly, like your stats, for example. You don't want those streaming to your boot device. That's not great, especially because they're every second. So, there'll be some trade-offs, but those are the kind of things we'll have to look at and see if that becomes a more viable or attractive option again in the world of, I don't want to pay a bunch of money for a flash-based SSD to go and use as my boot device only, right? If I'm going to spend money, I'd rather make that my slog or something else, or even a separate pool, So we'll take a look at it. No promises, but it's an interesting idea and it's worth reconsidering. Again, it might become hot again, and that's the way.
Yeah.
The one idea I do love, though, Chris, is if we did go back to a USB, I'd probably forego having the installation entirely. And instead, the moment you DD the image, that is the image, and you just boot it at that point. So there's no install wizard at all. So that would be a
bootable live image.
It's just a bootable live image at that point. So maybe that's a different twist we can do if we go and revisit that from way back in the FreeNAS days.
Exactly. Well, I know there is a weird edge case, and I was actually talking with somebody else who did some interesting work. Now, it wasn't FreeBSD, but there's some interesting edge cases around that one with pool labels and having the same pool IDs. Happens when you reinstall. So if you happen to be listening, Vince, know that we're already thinking of that bug, and we're going to find a way to stomp that one out. So going to the next, it wasn't so much a question here. It was a comment saying, hey, thank you for doing your talk on, the SSD's behavior. He says, it turns out, it's from Ivan 40229, says, turns out I have a lightly used older Samsung SSD. I wanted to put in use now instead of buying a new one, but it turns out this is a bad boy which does not properly support trim. Probably
That's unfortunate.
Yeah, like there are certain use cases where you don't necessarily need trim, but you probably do want to have the option to at least run it manually, and if it does run, to have that trim not destroy your data.
Be careful again. You're using old device. I think we had a whole episode just about that recently. So good stuff. Okay, and this last one here from visampa. Is that interesting? Okay. It would be great to offer changelog information on app updates and change the app updates to match the Docker release numbers instead of TrueNAS having its own numbering system. So that's the first part of the question. Then how soon do we get to a stable option for updates? I love all the fast, incredibly awesome updates you make, but I don't really want to spend any more time feeling like I'm using some sort of beta software. Okay, so the first part of the question there, the update system. That's not a bad thought on the app side. We do have a separate version string we have to keep, though, because there are app updates, which is the actual Docker container. That's the thing the third-party developer is shipping. But then we also have our infrastructure around the apps, which also need their own update mechanism. For example, we may decide to push a new UI option to expose a flag or a feature for that app. Oh, you want to be able to flip this knob on or off? Well, there's two schools of thought. We can either find a way to push that immediately, or I have to wait and push that with the next legitimate app update. And if they're on their own release cadence and it's slow, you might be waiting some time. So we did opt to go the other route where it's like, no, we have two version schemes, if you will. One, which is for the Docker Compose infrastructure and for the app framework, if you will. And then the second is the thing you're running inside the container. Yeah. And then for the stable option for updates, I think we just announced something about that. So I think going to the yearly cadence, that's exactly what you're going to get and see. So I think we just answered your question there. Hopefully you'll enjoy that when 26 launches a bit later this year.
Yeah, answered it before asking. That's a pretty good way to do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you very much, everybody, for tuning in today. We really enjoyed your questions. We enjoyed giving you a little bit of insight into where we're going with TrueNAS coming up. Again, it's going to be TrueNAS 26, not 26 dot anything, other than when we start dropping those feature updates and service packs kind of thing. So be interesting times. So absolutely, please do those usual YouTube things for us. Give us a like and subscribes. Otherwise, I'm going to pull my flash drive out, and Chris is going to have to fend me off.
Oh no!
Give us some feedback in the comment section below. Please continue to interact with us. Again, we're trying to answer all your comments as we get them. You can also drop a question to us at t3@truenas.com. Join us on the TrueNAS community forums at forums.truenas.com. Thank you very much for tuning in. Once again, Chris and I will see you next time.